Welcome to the Binge Dietitian podcast. I'm Jonathan, and I'm here to help you end 24/7 food thoughts, binge eating, and actually enjoy life with food. This episode is for educational and informational purposes only, not to be substituted for medical or personalized advice. Check the link in the description for my recovery resources, and let's get straight to the episode. Hey guys, welcome to the Binge Dietitian podcast, and in this episode, I'd like to really introduce Erin. But how about you tell us a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, well, it's great to be here, Jonathan. Thank you so much for having me. I am a registered dietitian and I have a master's degree in nutrition science. I'm also a certified personal trainer, and I actually also have a certification in holistic cannabis use for things like, chronic fatigue and pain and digestive issues and also mental health. So I am a dietitian, and we kind of talked a little bit off air about this, but my journey to becoming a dietitian was actually rooted with my own digestive issues.
Mm. Would you want to explore, from that little intro, we have so many avenues to explore from, but how would we start off with your own digestive issues? What kind of digestive issues did you have in the first place?
Sure. So as of right now, I specialize in gut health. I work with patients with IBS, with inflammatory bowel disease, celiac disease, GERD, acid reflux, those types of things. But myself personally, I really struggled with what was diagnosed as IBS at the time. And I, kind of started with digestive issues ever since I was a kid. And they didn't really know what was going on. They did a lot of different testing and tried different supplements and medications and things like that. But at the end of the day, they just kind of blanket term said, you have IBS. And growing up, that was really difficult. It actually put a really big strain on my relationship with food. And, anybody that's listening that's ever had digestive issues or experienced digestive discomfort can understand that, it's really hard to see food in a positive light when it's not making you feel well, or if you're perceiving that that's the root cause of what's not making you feel well. So I was on a mission to really find out what was going on with my gut. And through that process, becoming a dietitian was a really great foundation, learning clinical nutrition and understanding the science behind it and case studies. But I spent a lot of my own time throughout the course of my life doing my own research and really digging deeper than what, kind of we're taught in conventional medicine to figure out how I could address my own health issues from a very holistic perspective. Because just like anything, when it comes to nutrition or health, we're not just isolated systems. We have, every system of the body is connected. Your gut is connected to your brain and your mental health. And I was learning that food, wasn't the only focus that I needed to prioritize when healing my own digestive issues. So kind of a long-winded way of, my journey, but, lots of mental health challenges in between there, struggles with my own relationship with food. And I'm very happy to say that I feel like I've come so far in my journey, and I'm so grateful that I'm now able to help others with theirs.
It's amazing. And with IBS, there's no diagnostic test or gold standard for diagnosing "quote unquote" IBS. It's more of like method of exclusion, and then they find out, okay, it might be IBS. Was it actually IBS, or did they have any tests they went through?
So they did a test for lactose intolerance. That was a test that they did confirm that I did have lactose intolerance. But I did my own testing further down the road that tested positive for SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and Candida, which is a yeast overgrowth, because, which made sense because I was on all these antibiotics as a kid because I had chronic ear infections, which it's a very vicious cycle because with antibiotics, they kill off a lot of the good bugs in our gut, which then can predispose you to these other overgrowths, which can cause long-term issues. So they just said IBS. They said, take fiber supplements. When you have diarrhea, take Imodium. They really had this treatment plan that was just about addressing symptoms. There was never any further testing.
Yeah. And so when you were diagnosed with IBS, where did it, and then you found out it was SIBO. What did you do? I'm just curious with,
Yeah.
was it completely resolved, the SIBO, or you still, like, tell me more about it.
Yeah. So I originally just addressed it dietary wise, and I didn't realize at the time that that was a big mistake. And I was actually working with a functional dietitian at the time, and she was advising me, to go on supplements to kill off the SIBO. And kind of in my gut and through my own education, I knew that there was an element missing there of addressing my mental health. I struggled with anxiety and I was over exercising at the time, and there was food restriction involved with my relationship with food because of how I was so sick all the time. So I knew that that area needed to be addressed as well, and that just taking the supplements wasn't going to cure that. But at the time, I was kind of desperate. So I went through the supplement protocol and I felt a little bit better at first, but then it just came back and all the symptoms came back because I wasn't really addressing the anxiety. I wasn't, broadening my diet. I was also on other medications. So there's so much to my story. So I'm sorry if this is very overwhelming. But I was on acid reducing medications because the SIBO had caused me to have GERD, reflux type symptoms. And then I was also on birth control, which was basically regulating my menstrual cycle because I had not had one in a long time. So the way I should have gone about it was I should have addressed the hormone imbalance. I should have addressed the other, mental health, made sure I was supporting my body in every single way. And then when I actually did find true relief from the SIBO was when my hormones were regulated. I was off the other medications. And then I did go through the protocol using natural antimicrobials. Usually physicians will choose to use a antibiotic like rifaximin or Xifaxan, and very popular SIBO treatment. I chose to go the natural route just because I did a bunch of research and found that those are just as effective in most of the research studies as those other antibiotics. So I did a very well-rounded protocol that I actually put together for myself. Had things like oil of oregano and allicin, interface, which is a biofilm disruptor. And that really changed everything for me. I was able to then eat a lot of the FODMAP foods. If anybody's ever heard of the high FODMAP foods, the ones that were, some of my favorite foods like broccoli and avocado and dairy products even. This whole time I thought I was lactose intolerant. I really just needed to address my gut imbalances. So after that, I can now eat pretty much anything and, be symptom free.
Wow, that's amazing, because I would often hear people, struggling with SIBO for years and years. Some people would think, okay, there's no way to cure it anymore. Cure, quote unquote, more like remission. And especially, it must have been like a journey, because in face value, they said it was just IBS. And some people think IBS is a life sentence without, okay, just take the doctor's word for it. I'm not going to delve any more deeper into it. And apparently it's SIBO. What's the prevalence of SIBO, or how common is it?
It's actually quite common. And if you look at the research statistics on the amount of patients that are diagnosed with IBS who actually have SIBO, I think we're actually close to like 60% of people. Yeah. And it's hard because a lot of the symptoms overlap, right? So bloating or alternating constipation or diarrhea. There's a few symptoms that kind of lead us more towards SIBO to kind of give us an idea of like, maybe this isn't IBS. And those things might include certain nutrient deficiencies. So I was very B12 iron deficient. Vitamin D was very low. So those are some signs that you could have SIBO, because when those bacteria grow in the upper part of the digestive tract, which is the small intestine, that's where we absorb the bulk of our nutrients. So blood testing can sometimes give us, is folate low, is B12, is vitamin D. And then sometimes just the symptoms of, really having more brain fog and joint pain and things like that can result from the nutrient deficiency. But it's hard because a lot of those symptoms are pretty much the same. And so it makes it really difficult for even clinicians to diagnose So as they become more aware and as the research continues to come out, hopefully they'll be better at diagnosing or doing diagnostic testing for SIBO.
Absolutely. I mean, so most people who listen to this podcast, they struggle with mostly like IBS, and like bloating, GERD, reflux, those kinds of symptoms. And like you often assume people who have IBS that the deficiencies might be related to low mood, because IBS is often associated with like low mood, anxiety, stress, and in turn could cause people to eat less, not go out in the sun to get some vitamin D. Mostly the prevalence, if I'm correct, is more of women, so they're more likely to get iron deficiency. So there's there's so much overlap too.
Yes. And
Yeah.
that's why it makes it, really important to work with somebody who's looking at the whole picture, or at least to have a care team that they're looking at the food, they're looking at the mental health, they're going to check not just your gut, but they're going to check your thyroid and your vitamin D. And that's, I can't do it all, but my practice has really grown into a place where I can offer all these different types of testing, and I make sure we're talking about mental health, and then bring some care team, people in that can also support us there. So there's a lot of overlap. And that's why even trying to do it on my own, as I just mentioned, I worked with someone because it was really helpful to just have someone organize things for me and to just have an outward perspective of my health history and medical history, to really support me along the way. So my heart goes out to anybody struggling, because it is a very overwhelming process. But I will say, even if it takes time, which a lot of the times it does, we often can live a life that is at least reduced symptoms, if not symptom free.
Mm, that's amazing. And let's move on to like IBS, focusing on IBS at the moment and binge eating, because people who often binge eat, they're constantly chasing. Well, this is also me when I struggled back then with binge eating, chasing this goal of weight loss. And then once you have a binge eating episode, like eating a large portion of food really, really quickly, you feel guilty. And the next day, you want to try to make up for the binge, quote unquote, by trying to essentially starve yourself, deprive yourself as much as possible, which is leading to another binge. So basically, this can really worsen or exacerbate IBS like symptoms. What are some tips you would give to people who have like IBS at the moment, or quote unquote SIBO, but like the bloating and the discomfort, the change in stool habits? What can you suggest to people who are struggling with binge eating and IBS like symptoms?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, of course, addressing the binge eating and the emotional aspect of it is so important. And I want to just mention the blood sugar balance part of it and how that impacts our mood and our gut. When we have a stressor to the body, or if our blood sugar is being dysregulated, meaning we're fasting all day, our blood sugar can get very low. And then we have poor mood, symptoms of anxiety, depression, which are, of course, more likely to lead to a binge, for example. So, keeping in mind, and sometimes, I tell clients the science behind it because it can motivate them to really set themselves up for success. But for tips for bloating, constipation, gas, things like that, I really love teas. So there's teas like ginger and peppermint and fennel, which those three are probably my top favorites when it comes to bloating.
Fennel
And
tea. Never heard of that.
fennel. Yep. So fennel, you could also chew the fennel seed. It's really good for just kind of breaking up some of the gas and reducing inflammation in the digestive tract. So if you, just ate a large meal, you can chew few pieces of fennel, and that can really help almost within, minutes to kind of just break some of the gas up and give you some relief. And then peppermint, also an antispasmodic. So if you're having a lot of these contractions in your digestive system that are causing you to have maybe pain or discomfort, also really great for all of those symptoms. And then ginger is it's also antispasmodic, it's anti-inflammatory, and it also helps with stimulating digestive juices, right? So if you just had a large meal, having assistance with that digestion, because you're asking a lot from your digestive tract to really break down all that food and absorb it. And so just giving some support with the ginger tea can be helpful. And then, a lot of my clients will use probiotics. They can be beneficial for certain individuals. If you have SIBO, for example, there are certain probiotics that might make you feel worse. So they're not always appropriate for certain candidates. But there's also different types of probiotics. There's a yeast-based one, a lactobacillus-based one, a spore-based probiotic. So we have to choose the right one for each individual case. But probiotics in general can be really helpful for supporting digestion.
Wow, that's really interesting. I mean, there's lots of things to come from, but I was just like mind blown about fennel because isn't that like well, I'm not really the best with my cooking knowledge. Isn't that like a seed that you just pour into mainly curries, I think?
Yeah, they do use it. Yeah, they do use it in a lot of different curries. And it has a lot of flavor. It's kind of tastes like a licorice type of flavor to me, like almost like a black licorice. It's not my favorite flavor personally, but it is great to just chew on a few of those and very accessible, easy to find in most grocery stores.
Yeah, okay, that's really interesting. I'll take note of that. Because here in the UK, we also recommend, based on the general guidelines, for people to have like a tablespoon of linseeds or flax seeds, they call it.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe the fiber content and reduces gas also.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Flaxseed for some can be a little tough for some. And some people have like a sensitivity to flaxseed. But overall, I mean, it's an excellent source. And if someone doesn't tolerate linseed, they could try chia seed. That's another really great type of fiber that does support digestion and usually a little bit easier and less gas producing for some of my clients.
Yeah. And going to the peppermint teas and the ginger, how much is enough to reduce the bloat? Do you have to drink like 5 peppermint teas or let it brew?
No. Yeah, so you want to make sure to brew it at the proper temperature. Too high, you can, kind of destroy some of the benefits. But overall, I mean, doing just even a single cup, like an 8-ounce cup or 6-ounce cup of warm tea is plenty. You don't have to drink large volumes. And in fact, drinking lots of water, especially after eating a large meal, can actually make your digestive process less efficient. So the ideal way to, if you did just have a large meal and you're having a lot of bloating, then doing the smaller cup, a more concentrated serving of the tea is going to be your best option so that you're not drinking a ton of water, which is, of course, putting in a lot more volume into the digestive tract.
A little break before we continue with the podcast. What if I told you that you could end binge eating once and for all and still keep all the binge foods you love, but without losing control over them? Yep, it is possible. You don't need any willpower, no more jumping from diet to diet, and no more meal replacement shakes. You'll also improve your bloating, heartburn, and low energy levels. It's all possible with my self-paced online course called the Binge Freedom Blueprint. It's everything I wish I knew when I struggled with binge eating, all packaged into one platform to help you live the life you truly deserve. The whole goal is to help you put an end to Googling binge eating help once and for all, and to focus fully on the things we really care about in life, such as friends, family, and relationships. So click the link in the description of this podcast now to learn more about the Binge Freedom Blueprint. And with that, let's get back straight to the episode. Yeah, that's really interesting. And most people who are struggling with binge eating, sometimes they anticipate a binge, they feel the urge, and then they're like, oh well, might as well binge now. There's no gap in between. Is there, would you recommend like digestive enzymes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, digestive enzymes can be great. I have a lot of clients use those for many different reasons. But yes, anytime large portions of food are consumed, it would be good to assist your body in supplementing with some of those.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And for people who are listening at the moment, this is not an excuse to be like, time to have a binge and time to reduce these symptoms, like intentionally. Just take a digestive supplement, have some peppermint tea. It's more about trying to reduce the impact symptoms of binge eating. It's not a cure-all. If people
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. You should always speak with your doctor. Sometimes fennel can have, impacts with certain medications. Any of these herbs or natural supplements aren't safe for everybody. So always speaking with your doctor and making sure that you're choosing the right fit for you. But just some that really have worked in my practice.
Yeah. Oh, that's really good. That's really handy. And so when people are, what I try to do for people who are struggling with binge eating is try to establish a regular eating pattern, which is like your breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks in between, because that's been shown to be really helpful for IBS-like symptoms. So let's say someone, coming from my experience, I'm just projecting my experience into this. Let's say someone's just simply having coffee for breakfast and then maybe salad and plain boiled chicken for lunch. Are there any like better meal choices that would improve your gut health and reduce these symptoms?
Yeah, definitely. And I am the same as you. I really try to encourage people to have regular meals.
Mm.
It's fascinating. Our gut actually has its own circadian rhythm. The same way that we kind of get sleepy as the sun goes down. Our gut bacteria, the bacteria that live in our digestive tract, they like to be on a schedule. So just being on a schedule alone is a really great way to support regular bowel movements and less bloating and optimal motility and movement of the gut. But so for breakfast, for example, I tell clients never have coffee on an empty stomach. And the reason that I say that, and some people will, come after me for this one, but coffee on an empty stomach can actually really increase your cortisol levels, which is a stress hormone. And that's not optimal for your body. So it can increase cortisol levels to a higher amount, and it can also suppress your appetite. So that what happens there is that now you are feeling very energized artificially, and then you don't have an appetite, so you don't feel like eating, which might seem great and, whatever. But then as soon as that caffeine wears off, your appetite comes back with a vengeance. You realize that you're tired and your blood sugar is all over the place because you did not properly fuel in the morning. So it's actually more likely to set you up for a binge. So the number one rule, no coffee on an empty stomach. So I tell clients,
That was me.
Yes, I've been there, no judgment. Always start your day with a full glass of water, throw a little bit of lemon in there, nice warm glass of water with lemon. A really great way to support digestion and overall gut health. Lemon's full of prebiotics, so really helps to support those healthy bacteria. And then have something for breakfast that has fiber and protein and some carbohydrates. So, fiber could come from fruits and berries. Protein could come from eggs or sausages or, Greek yogurt, which is a great source of probiotics, which contains beneficial bacteria. And then whole grain carbohydrates. So we're thinking of things like oatmeal or whole grain toast or, any sort of like potatoes. Those are great sources of complex carbohydrates. So those are some examples for breakfast. And then for lunch, again, so you've got a protein and then some sort of veggie and then a carbohydrate. And plain food is not ideal for the gut because our guts love herbs and spices, believe it or not. And I think it's a very undervalued discussion when it comes to gut health because it's a very simple tool to not only flavor our food and make it taste exciting and fun, right? I've been the camp of I'm just going to make my food super bland and boring, but yeah, there's just that's not the fun way to live. So, flavoring your food with different herbs and spices can really change the enjoyment of the food, but also it's been shown to improve the diversity of our gut bacteria. And higher diversity in the gut is associated with better outcomes in all aspects of our health, both mental, physical. Mm-hmm. So, adding some oregano or, basil, thyme, garlic powder, onion powder to that chicken, adding olive oil when you cook something or to your salad has polyphenols in it, which support the growth of beneficial bacteria, helps to reduce inflammation in the gut. Maybe you throw some flaxseed in there to give you those omega-3s to support inflammation in the gut. And then again, those complex carbohydrates, which feed the bacteria in our gut and help to keep our bowels nice and regular. So you could have sweet potato, or you could put some, wild rice on the salad, or some croutons, or, dried fruits to kind of spice it up a little bit. So there's many different options. And I'm a food lover, so I could give you food ideas all day.
That's amazing. So you're just giving the whole recipe book.
Yeah.
Erin, like you mentioned about olive oil, that's a common fear food for most people because of the energy content. But although it's like really delicious, there's also I don't know if you've heard in around Instagram or TikTok, it's probably been all around the place about fear of seed oils. I know like
Mm-hmm.
olive oil is not ideally a seed oil, but other oils, like what are some in my mind?
Sunflower and
Yeah.
canola oil. Yeah.
Yeah. What's the evidence behind that for people who are
Yeah. That's a great question. And it's so important because it is everywhere. And I think people are, terrified to even touch them to their lips.
where
And
it came from?
yeah. And you know what? It's functional medicine. It's, people that are in this movement of, we'll do air quotes, clean eating. We have this obsession now with completely ridding ourselves of any possible thing that could potentially harm us or make us feel impure or, whatever it may be. And I'm a dietitian and I appreciate health, right? I want everyone to be healthy. I want to be healthy. But we have to remember that mental health is part of that. And, I can give you an example of, a client saying, oh, I splurged and had a cracker that was made with sunflower oil, right? I think that's extreme, right? That is too extreme.
Yeah.
So where this came from, there is research that shows that a diet that is high in seed oils is more pro-inflammatory and it can create oxidative damage to the cells in the body and, cause different changes in our metabolic health. Yes, we do see that in research. So it's all about balance, right? So these seed oils are high in what are known as omega-6 fatty acids. So we have these omega-6 fatty acids, and then we have omega-3 fats. So omega-3 fats come from things like chia seed, flaxseed, walnuts, high-fat fish. And when we have an imbalance of these omega-3s and these omega-6s in the diet is when we start to experience inflammation in the body. So when these are much higher than the omega-3s, that's when we see less favorable health outcomes. And then there's also the concern of how the oils are processed, right? So one might say, eating sunflower seeds might be fine, but is the oil being processed and bleached and deodorized? And, what effect does that have on the final product? Again, the research isn't completely clear on what impact this has or what the outcome of the oil is and what's in the final product necessarily. So I think the fear mongering is, it was rooted in some aspect of science, but it's kind of been taken to this level that people are exaggerating and creating a lot more fear than, is necessary because these omega-6 fats in our diet are essential. We do need omega-6s in the fats. And, you best believe I love my sunflower seeds and I love incorporating all different types of these types of fats in my diet. But I don't, make processed foods the number one recommendation for anybody, right? We try to find balance in the diet. And so where do we find a lot of these seed oils, things like fried foods or highly processed foods? So we just try to bring some balance into it rather than, until we have more data to say these are the worst thing for us and they're definitely causing disease, we need to kind of create a little bit more balance in our diets.
Yeah. Speaking of balance, this is coming on to another side note. So people might assume as a gut health dietitian that you're eating everything quote unquote perfectly for your gut health, anti-inflammatory quote unquote foods, once again, like blueberries, fennel seeds and all the things. So on the topic of moderation, could you explain a bit more about is moderation healthy, if that makes sense?
Yeah. No, it does make sense. And I will say, I was thinking about this the other day, and I've said this to clients of at the time of my life when I was so hyper focused on making everything in my diet perfect, my mental health was at its worst. And I was also not physically as healthy because I was missing out on social events and I was fixating on my food too much. And I was just losing a lot of this mental energy to something that was just not where I should have been investing my energy in. So, I've transitioned over my life. I used to be vegan. I used to be paleo. I've tried all the different, quote unquote, fad diets out there. And some of those were experimental, just to kind of like see, how my body would respond. And part of it was disordered, right? There was a disordered aspect of that eating, of thinking that that food was going to cause inflammation in my body, or it was going to hurt my gut health. And so there was a fear based around those foods. So I've been through it all. I have all the experience to share. And now the way that I eat is one in which the majority of the foods that I cook at home, which I'm a big fan of, I love cooking at home. I now incorporate things like butter and red meats and, sugars from things like maple syrup and honey. And, I don't eat them every day, every meal, but they're not off limits, right? The second that you create something off limits, any sort of restriction, you are setting yourself up for A, disordered relationship with food, but B, just relevance of this podcast, a binge, right? There's always some element of restriction that is coming into that usually. So I advise my clients, you have a very plant-forward diet. You eat lots of different colors and fruits and vegetables, and you have high quality proteins. We don't eliminate animal proteins unless there's a moral, reason that you really feel strongly about. But we diversify. We have plants forward. We have high quality proteins. We have anti-inflammatory fats, incorporated into the diet. And then we have fun with foods, right? We go out and we have pizza and we, don't feel like we're never going to get it again. So we have to eat the whole thing. We have, the serving that makes us feel content and satisfied. And then we, go about our day the next day eating the foods that taste good and make us feel good. So it's really this delicate balance, and it takes a lot of time to kind of find your groove, especially depending on your history with your relationship with food, or depending on health issues, things like SIBO or IBS. But it's different for everyone, but balance is really, really important. And there should never be this hyper fixation on everything in your food being perfect, because life isn't perfect, right? We're constantly exposed to different things. Even fruits and vegetables have things like heavy metals or pesticides, and we're never going to live in a sterile world where nothing could harm our bodies. It's about creating a body that's resilient, right? And if your body is resilient, and if you've got enough vitamin D, your bowels are regular, you're detoxing really well because you're eating enough on a regular basis and moving your body, then, a handful of tortilla chips with some seed oils is no big deal, So that's the way I try to frame it for clients, to help them. The name of my business is Nutrition Rewired, and it's rewiring the way that we think about nutrition and wellness, because when we do that, it really allows us to truly achieve what optimal health looks like, which is not black or white. It's not this one extreme versus the other.
Yeah. Oh, that's perfect, Erin. And I like how you named your business Nutrition Rewired, as in like you're trying to rewire or like reframe your mindset, rather than just simply, like you mostly hear, nutrition debunked, or like just debunking and then just that's it. Not reframing your mindset around it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's a lot of it. I mean, the mindset part of anything when it comes to health is, even that placebo effect of, just lightening up and feeling a little bit more relaxed about your food choices can reduce inflammation in the body. So we can't forget about the power of the brain.
Yeah. Okay. So Erin, we're going to go, one of the final big things that most people who are struggling with binge eating do is they jump onto diets. But we're going to go through a quick fire round session of how does this X diet affect your gut health? So how do keto diets affect your gut health?
So I've done tons of stool tests. So I do functional lab stool testing in my practice. And anytime that I have a keto client come to me for the first time, I know it before I even look at their food diary, because their beneficial bacteria are super low. So remember that carbs and fibers, they feed the healthy gut bacteria, so it can significantly reduce the diversity.
Do you get them struggling mostly with constipation if they're avoiding or reducing these?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. That's like the number one, that the keto diet, any sort of low carb diet, those are almost always going to result in constipation unless you're, using something like a supplement to kind of manage that, which is not advisable.
Mm. Okay, that's keto. So, Erin, on the topic, you might have heard online on social media about from TikTok or Instagram about these guys, mostly guys, who are pro carnivore diet and also anti fruits and veg. What do you think about those?
Yeah, so I do have a lot of concerns with that type of diet. When we look at these very restrictive diets, again, we do see negative changes in the gut microbiome because we're not consuming these, fiber-rich foods and foods that are rich in polyphenols. And I understand the, the reason to pursue them based on what people are educated about, but food scientists have really known about anti-nutrients for a very long time, and we're really just scratching the surface when it comes to understanding these substances and, how they function in human health. But based on the research that we have as a whole, anti-nutrients are not necessarily going to hurt us. And if anything, research that is showing that a diet rich in certain plant foods has quite a range of health benefits. So, there's certain individuals that, with autoimmune disease or, severe, leaky gut, which is that gut permeability, they may benefit from, reducing the amount of anti-nutrient rich foods, things like raw, cruciferous vegetables or things like lentils and beans. But completely eliminating these foods in the diet have been really concerning to me. And we know that these foods have a lot of benefits to overall health.
Yeah, and on the topic of like jumping back to the meat, red meat it's pretty tough on the gut, isn't it?
So I think there's a big misconception about, meat and how hard it is to digest
Oh, is
and,
it?
that it just sits in the gut. Like I had debunked this a while ago about, I think I saw a TikTok on veganism and how meat sits in your colon for 15 days and
Days.
just totally inaccurate. Our digestive system, and I can vouch for this because I eat red meat and I have regular daily bowel movements. I've tested my motility time and it comes out right on time. So, it's one of those things where, yes, it's definitely higher in fat and higher in protein, and it does require stomach acid to digest, which if you have super low stomach acid because you're really stressed or you have nutrient deficiencies or you have overgrowth, then yes, it will be more challenging for your body to break down red meat, for example. But red meat is incredibly nutrient dense. Do I think everyone should be eating 6 ounces of it every day for dinner? No, we need to find a balance. So we say 2 to 3 servings per week of unprocessed, high quality red meats.
Yeah, okay, that's really good. Because I love having since I love going to the gym regularly, and the best source of protein for me, which I don't have, as a note, I don't have it every single day, tons of ounces, is just lean beef. So like lean beef mince because it's really high, large surface area. You can eat a lot of it. It's quite delicious, but in moderation,
Yeah.
as you mentioned before.
Absolutely. And you know what? Making sure, like if you had a family history of high cholesterol, you would just monitor your cholesterol levels, for example. But everyone's so different that these general recommendations that we have are not like the Bible of nutrition, right? So it's important to remember that, monitoring your blood work and paying attention to how you feel. All of those are good ways to personalize, along with, of course, I'm going to say this, but working with a dietitian to make sure that you're getting the things you need.
Yeah, just a holistic view you mentioned before.
Yes, exactly.
All right. And finally, you mentioned the word earlier, detoxing. So how does that affect? Well, detoxing is a very general term, but from most people you see who come to you, what's their definition of detox, and how does it affect your gut?
Yeah. So most people think of detox as this like thing that we need to do once a year or once a month to like completely rid our bodies of everything in the bowels. That's how most of my clients picture detoxing. But I think we are really misunderstanding how detox works and the different organs and stages of detoxification, because, the liver and the kidneys are two major sources of detoxification in the body, as well as our lungs, our respiratory tract. And so when people think of detox, they think, well, if I'm going to the bathroom a ton and, basically getting rid of everything in my bowels, then I'm detoxing. But the way our body processes toxins, we actually have phase 1, we have phase 2, and we have phase 3 in the liver. And so, all of those steps are important. And yes, we need to support our body's detox system. So, it can be a very trendy thing to say, look, let's detox, but we should be supporting our detox systems all the time. And so, yes, of course, getting things moving in your bowels is part of it, but that's the end. Your liver does all this stuff, your kidney does all this stuff, and then your gut is what says, okay, we're going to open up the drain and let everything out. So coffee enemas and all that stuff, no. I'm not a fan of those. There's ways to support detox that I'm definitely a fan of. Things like incorporating high quality protein. You need B vitamins to detox. You need sulfur compounds like onion and garlic. There's also supplements like things like MSM that can help detoxification, or N-acetylcysteine. But yeah, people just, I think, are missing the science behind how detoxification works. And they're using it as I feel like I did something really bad, so now I need to do all this to overcompensate. Whereas we should really just be supporting these systems on a daily basis, drinking plenty of water, eating a high quality diet, moving our bodies, not thinking teas or anything like that and just causing us to have diarrhea is a form of detoxification, because it's not the whole picture.
Yeah, most detox teas contain laxatives. So.
Exactly. Yes. Because it's a psychological thing of if I'm lighter and I'm feeling like I'm getting rid of stuff, then that must be detox. But that's not actually true.
Yeah, a funny thing that really popped up into my mind is, when we were younger, or actually you still see it in hospitals and stuff, the GI tract, you see a picture of a body and then the esophagus and everything, and then the small and large intestines, it looks pink, there's nothing in it. So some people might think, oh, well, it's pink, small intestines and large intestines. There's nothing in it in the picture, in the science book. So that's what my intestines should look like all the time.
That's a good point. Yeah, I never really thought about those graphics and what our exposure is to those things, because people will say, oh, if I didn't have a bowel movement today, and they get all anxious, I need to get rid of it. Or, of course, there's a disordered eating component of if I eat all this food, I need it to come out of me. I feel, bad, or, just toxic or whatever. And it's misconception. Our bodies are, we're meant to consume food and have things in that system. So
yeah. Normally it's meant in the large intestine, especially, it's meant to be pretty full up, I guess. Assume. Yeah.
Yep.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, you've debunked so many things, and you really opened my eyes about so many things about IBS, SIBO, regular eating patterns, what kind of foods to eat. If people want to work with you, Erin, where can they find you and where can they follow you?
Yeah, so I have a podcast, Nutrition Rewired, which is on Spotify, SoundCloud, iTunes. They can find me on Instagram, which is most of where I spend my social media time, as well as TikTok at Nutrition Rewired. And then my website, which, I have a blog and a newsletter if you want to keep up on some of these topics that I talk about and research. And then you can always send me an email at erin@nutritionrewired.com.
That's perfect. And I'll be popping all of those in the link in the description of this podcast. And finally, there's this tradition that I do with guests in the podcast is the previous guest would ask a guest, which is you, the current guest, a question. And the previous guest asked, if you'd go back and talk to your 8-year-old self about your relationship with your food, what would you say to your 8-year-old self?
That is a good one. So I would say, that was a time when I was not thinking or taking care of my body, of course, at 8 years old. And I didn't have a negative relationship with my body at that time. If anything, I was not thinking of how I could take care of myself. I was eating food that was making me sick. And then I would kind of just keep eating that food. And it was almost like I was stuck in this cycle of not thinking about that. I mean, I was 8, right? So give myself a little bit of a break there. But, it was a period of time when I kind of, I would have told that 8-year-old self that, hey, it's not my fault that I feel this way. And, I was kind of born with these predispositions or whatever it may be that made me feel this way. I probably would have tried to take a little bit better care of my diet. I was living off of mostly candy and, things like ice cream and pizzas, and they were making me feel really sick, which was resulting in me spending a lot of time in the bathroom. So I would hopefully try to help that 8-year-old self out a little bit more so that I could have spent a little less time in the bathroom.
Good advice.
Yep. No such thing as TMI in my office. So
especially if you're focusing on gut health and everything.
Yep. There's nothing off limits. So
Well, Erin, what's the question you would like to ask for the next guest?
yeah. So my favorite question to ask is, what is your favorite childhood memory with food? Because I love reminiscing about like fun foods that I grew up with. I think it's very nostalgic, and I love to hear people's answers about their memories around food.
I'll point that back to you. So what's your favorite memory with food that you'd love to reminisce?
Yeah. This is actually, I would say I'll use one that just recently came up because I have a cookbook, and I made the banana bread from my cookbook. And one of my favorite foods when I would go up to my grandparents' house in Maine, which was associated with so many positive memories, just swimming in the lake and being with my family and cousins and just so much fun. My grandmother would always make banana bread, and just a nice cold piece of banana bread with cold butter that was salted. And I just recreated that this week, and it brought me right back. So that's mine.
Would you add anything to the banana bread, like chocolate chips or cinnamon or anything?
No, I was a very simple person when I was a kid. Like if I had a sandwich, it would be bread and like one piece of deli meat, like no condiments, nothing, which has very much changed now. Like now I would have put like coconut shreds and chocolate chips and all this stuff. But just the simplicity sometimes of those food combinations is enough to just satisfy me.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, Erin,
Yeah.
thanks so much for coming along to this podcast. And once again, for people who are listening, I'll pop over the links to where you can find Erin and work with Erin in the description of this podcast. And yeah, feel free to check out Erin and maybe subscribe to her newsletter and send her an email if you have any questions. So
Great.
yeah, once again, thanks so much for coming along to the podcast, Erin.
Thank you, Jonathan. It was such a pleasure being here. I appreciate the conversation.
What if I told you you can end binge eating and still keep all the foods you love without dieting, without willpower, and no more meal plans? Check the link in the description for my exclusive self-paced Binge Freedom Blueprint online course to learn everything I wish I knew when I struggle with binge eating. It's all packaged into one platform to make it easy to transform your life right now.